Hello and welcome back to the MC. This is Ed McCarthy and I am here with Audrey Denney, our current Democratic candidate for Congressional District 1. This is part 3 of our conversation. Thank you for hanging in there. I'm hoping that you're enjoying this.
You're also here with my kitten Harper.
Welcome, Harper.
She just showed up for the third segment.
As she should. So we were talking a little bit about, spending priorities and deficits and things like that. And I know, going into this year, we started with a, $1 trillion deficit before all of this started. We've now spent about $3 trillion in really necessary.
Hey, I'm going to interrupt you really quick. The roll call for the fourth stimulus bill just came out, and our congressman did the right thing and voted for it, even though.
Well,
no.
He voted for those unconscionable democratic ideas of funding our hospitals and funding testing. Good for him.
Good for him. We love it when he does the right thing.
Good. Now we've spent about $3 trillion, more or less, so we're up to $4 trillion, probably the largest deficit that our country has ever run. And it is possible that in 2020, the deficit from this year alone will be larger than the entire 8 years under Obama. So, what are we going to do? What are your thoughts on that? How do we recover from this?
Well, I'd like to take our minds back to December of 2017, and remember the GOP tax bill that went through at that time, and that in itself was going to add $1.5 trillion of debt to our economy over the 10 years that followed it. And as we mentioned before, that 83% of those benefits went to corporations and the wealthiest among us. So the GOP decided to do a massive tax giveaway to themselves and their friends, the leadership in the House, when times were good, right? Because they allegedly believe in the trickle-down economics. And if we cut corporate tax rates, by golly, they're gonna pass those savings right along to their employees and everyone, instead of getting $9 an hour is going to get $9.50. Guess what? We know that doesn't work, because when we give corporations tax cuts, their shareholders and their CEOs get to buy fourth houses and second planes. And it doesn't actually ever come back. They get to buy back their stock options. It doesn't ever actually come back to the real people, the real working Americans who are struggling to make ends meet. And so I'd like to start by pointing out, in the good times, we should have been saving for times like this, right? We always need to be looking forward, especially now looking forward towards the uncertain future that climate change threatens us with. We have to be saving when times are good. We have to be making smart decisions. We have to be fiscally responsible. And that said, if I was your member of Congress right now, you bet your ass that I would have voted for every single one of these bills that are absolutely critical to provide relief to people right now, and to provide relief to our states, our counties, and most importantly, our individuals, to make sure that people can still get by. And later on, after we get out of this immediate relief phase, you bet I will be voting for stimulus packages that help boost our entire economy. And yeah, we're going to make the deficit bigger. But what we should have been doing is we should have been creating a tax policy that was fair for everyone, that didn't just give away our money to the richest among us. And
yeah, I saw
that's a little bit of what I think about that.
Yeah, I saw that the corporate taxes, they lowered the corporate tax rate, and corporate tax income is now down. So the lower, corporations have been doing better, yet they are paying less in federal taxes, right, which contributed to the initial deficits that we started with before we ended up where we are right now. So. And
I will give you $5. Let's make a $5 bet right here, that sometime within the next year, the GOP leadership in Washington, D.C. is going to again suggest cutting things like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security benefits, because we got to pay for this deficit, right? The GOP will continue to claim that they are the party of financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility, when it works for them. And when it works for them is trying to cut the rock solid benefits that real American people have been working their whole lives for, like Social Security, like Medicare. They have a history of doing this. and they will continue to do that. That's my $5 bet with you right now.
Yeah, I would not.
You're probably
take
not
that
going to
yet.
take it.
No,
Yeah,
because that's
it's not a good bet.
exactly what I expect as well. Because
Am I allowed to gamble during interviews? Is that gambling?
I have no idea.
Well, you didn't take the.
I'm sure there's an app for it, but
You didn't take the bet, so we're fine.
So what other sort of things have been on your mind lately? What are some of your other sort of, top priorities or top things that you've been thinking about more lately?
Yeah, I've alluded to it a couple times, but the thing that I pre-COVID-19, the thing that I thought about the most is how we restore our forests to health. Because for me, the root of a lot of our problems are in our forests. Like 50% of our district, the size of South Carolina, as I mentioned, 50% of this district is public lands, and 41% of the land mass in this district are federal forests. Like, I think that the job of the member of Congress who represents this area is basically the job of a natural resource manager in chief, right? That the natural resources that we have in our part of the world not only provide water for a lot of California, 2/3 of the water that falls in the state falls north of Sacramento, right? When our forests are healthy, they can be actively sequestering carbon, they can be habitat for wildlife. So we're mitigating climate change, we're providing ecosystem service benefits, we're providing jobs in our local economies. In the late 80s and the 90s, when the timber market crashed due to various restrictions, various ESA suits, and policy changes that changed the amount of biomass that we could pull off of federal forests. That's when our economies crashed up here, right? Siskiyou County used to have 22 mills functioning, and now they have two open mills. And so the decimation and the decline of the timber industry has crushed our forests and our mountain communities. And because when you lose your job and there's no other industry in your area, you get sucked up into a cycle of generational poverty, right? And all the things that go along with that, with opioid abuse, and all of the things that kind of trickle down after that. So making sure that we are putting our energy into getting our forests back into a state of health, which will provide all the things I talked about, help mitigate climate change. We haven't gotten to talk about climate change yet. Here's a fun fact for you. It's actually not a fun fact at all. In 2018, the two fires that were in our district, the Carr fire and the Camp fire, emitted 45 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. 45 million metric tons. Everybody's like, what the heck's a metric ton? That sounds like a lot. To put that in perspective, that is 9 times the amount of CO2 that California was able to reduce its emissions by that year.
Wow. 2
big fires, we blew everything we did that year by 9 times. You want to make sure that we have a livable planet to live on in 12 years, we need to get our forests into a healthy state. We need to mitigate our fire risk. We need to make them be sinks of carbon instead of blowing it up in the air as smoke. So
how exactly does that work? So
how are we going to do it? So the awesome news is there is already a policy on the books that gives us the framework to do this. And they're called conservation stewardship agreements. And they're part of the Farm Bill every year. The mechanism is codified in the Farm Bill every 4 to 5 years when it comes out. And what a conservation stewardship agreement does is it brings all the stakeholders around one table to make an integrated natural resource management plan for that forest. So we're talking about the private industry, we're talking about the loggers, we're talking about every level of government, so federal, state, local, county. We're talking everyone has to have an environmental agency or environmental nonprofit there. So we're talking about the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the Native American tribes who are in the area are at the table. All of the stakeholders are around the table together and they make an integrated natural resource management plan, which everyone can be healthy with. And so that's where are we gonna remove excess biomass? What's it gonna look like? Where are we gonna put it? Who's gonna do it? All that kind of stuff. And mind you, I don't have time to get into that. I was going to go on an ecosystem lecture, but I'll save that. I'm a science teacher, it happens. And then the funding mechanism is then the private guys, the private companies are allowed to go in there and do that work. They're able to do the selective logging, the limbing, the removal of that excess biomass. And then by selling off those timber products, that's how they get paid, right? And so We need to vastly increase the pace and scale of this restoration work. And we have the mechanism to do it already. So we need to make sure that our, District 5, which is the Forest Service district that we're in, our District 5 supervisor, Randy Moore, has everything that he needs to be able to do that, right? We need to work with our friends at CAL FIRE, our friends at the state of California, who are working on speeding up some of these high impact, these high risk projects that are happening around our district. And everybody needs to get on board that this is what we need to do. And the funny part is like, for so often in our history of talking about forest ecosystems, it's always been like, foresters are on this side and the environmentalists are on this side, but that's just not the case anymore, because we all have science has brought us to a mutual understanding of there's mutual benefits when our forests are healthy, right? Nobody wants to cut down all the trees, but everyone agrees that there are way too many trees in the forests right now. Like, fire resilient ecosystem in the mid 1850s had 50 to 100 trees per acre, 50 to 80 normally. Right now we have 300 to 400 trees per acre. They're so densely crowded, they're dying of beetle kill and different diseases and drought, and they're becoming these massive fire hazards where on a hot day or a windy day, one spark
takes it all out.
Anyway, I really like talking about ecosystem health. I'm not sure if you can tell.
Yeah, no, and it's very important up here, and I didn't realize that. So that, those plans that you were talking about, those would be specifically for federal forested lands?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the fun part about that too is they bring in, so you can look at a forest-wide plan, which is what I think we need to do for each of our federal forests. We've got, the Modoc, Plumas, Placer, like we have all of our different federal forests, and to really make this happen at scale, we need to be looking at a forest-wide plan. Because right now, a lot of the projects are small. It's like, okay, we're gonna look at this 1,200 acre piece. And that's great. That 1,200 acre piece needs to get healthy. But what we really need is to do this on all of our forested land. And that has ramifications all the way back down to career and technical education, right? Because if we're not training folks to operate a log skidder, then we're not going to have the local people that we need to do that work. And so you have to be able to look at it at a system level, right? And see how it's all interconnected, see how it's all intertwined, to move towards a solution, and to be able to look at things from different perspectives. And that's really where our congressman has failed us, is he has not done the work to understand the nuance and the complexity of these issues. We've got to make sure that there's a market for the biomass that's coming off of that. We need to work with the state of California to make sure that can get some of the same incentives that solar and wind is getting. And you have to look at all the parts of the puzzle to make a solution. And that's our congressman has proven himself over 8 years to be incapable of doing that. And besides the terrible votes he's making, I think that's reason enough to fire him.
Well, and I definitely agree with you. And I like your plan. It sounds like a great way of bringing more jobs and more education here to the North State. With so many people out of work, hopefully when you're in, you can work on getting some federal funding and putting some people to work in the near future on those types of projects. So I really want to thank you for all the time that you've spent talking.
Thanks, Ed. I've had fun.
I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk here today.
And we'll see you up in Shasta County when we're allowed to leave our houses again.
Yes, hopefully that's soon. Thank you for staying in and keeping everybody safe.
You bet. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.